AITA for saying my SIL is a doctor on the plane during an emergency even though she was asleep. My sister Allison 33F, her wife Elizabeth 35F, and their 2 kids Claude and Ava, both 5, were going on a family vacation together. They were kind enough to invite me 28M as well since I'm going through a breakup. We were on an 8-hour plane en route to our destination. I was just relaxing in my seat when 2 hours into the flight attendant asked if there were any doctors on board since there was an emergency. No one said they were. Now Elizabeth is a brilliant general surgeon, so without really thinking about it, I said there was a doctor. When I turned to tell her, I noticed Elizabeth and Allison were already comfortably asleep and holding hands. I woke them up and said they were looking for a doctor because there was an emergency. Elizabeth gave me a very nasty look and went to the back with the flight attendant. Allison looked a bit upset as well. When she came back, she had the most angry, pissed-off face I had ever seen on her, which is rare because usually she's a very sweet person. She avoided me the entire time. When I asked her what was wrong, she said she was tired as hell when she boarded the plane and just wanted to spend time with her family without carrying her work with herself. I defended myself saying when the attendant asked and no one else was available, I told them about her. She said I should have just kept quiet and let her get her much-needed sleep. I said there was an emergency and her help was needed and appreciated and not helping would be wrong. She just laughed and avoided me. Even after we got to our destination, she only hung out with Allison and their kids. Simply avoided me. I want to ask if what I did was really this wrong. AITA? First comment, you should apologize. I recently had this conversation with a friend of mine who is an ER doc who was explaining why he didn't stop on the road at an accident site after a night shift when he was on his way to have a fun day with friends. I didn't realize this before the conversation, but he explained that as a doctor, if you stop and help, you are then liable for that person's care until you can hand them off to someone of higher or similar care ability. So for him, another ER doc, that meant that had he stopped to help, he would have had to travel with any people he was treating in the ambulance all the way to the nearest hospital and then do a handoff there. After a full overnight shift when he had other plans he was looking forward to, and being about an hour away from the nearest ER, he wasn't willing to do so when he knew there was already other emergency personnel on the scene who could do just as much as he could. He also told me this is why he always drinks immediately when getting on a plane, so that he can say he is impaired if any emergencies come up and isn't liable for taking someone off the plane to the nearest hospital, ruining his trip for himself and whoever he is traveling with. I'm in the US and IDK, what laws are everywhere. I'm sure they are different, but I would bet the general rule applies. Doctors that volunteer are then obligated to follow rules and laws that could severely impact them and those they are with, and they should get to decide for themselves what they are willing to do. Second comment, no highest level of staff has to stay. Another paramedic doesn't supersede since they would be calling in for orders. Now random doctors on ambulances that transport don't have much say. Goes based on the supervising unit. In California, it gets routed to the responding fire department supervisor. The paramedic gets into the BLS ambulance. BLS can't argue or they'll lose their job and the company might lose the contract. I only know because I went on one crappy date with a doctor coworker. I stopped to help, then couldn't leave until paramedics turned up who were stuck in rush hour traffic. When they showed up, my date came up and said, "Let's go." Paramedic recognized the doctor. He was now considered on scene, and the fire captain guy said he wasn't allowed to leave even though paramedics were on scene. We had to call into our trauma center's dispatch station. It was a huge ordeal and I got in trouble for leaving the scene, but I didn't realize I had to stay too. I guess I wasn't released from handoff. There was no second date. Third comment, I'm EMS and if I'm not on duty at work, like any other regular person, I do not have a duty to act. If I come upon a fresh accident, I call it in for sure. If it looks nasty, I may pull over and assist. I live and work in rural Wyoming, so it can take time for emergency services to arrive. The service I work for is 47 miles away from the hospital we transport our patients to, even longer in winter. I do travel with a small trauma bag and have stopped and helped pretty often. But when I do, I'm operating as kind of fancy first aid rather than my actual licensure level advanced EMT. I'm covered by Good Samaritan laws and that's it. If it doesn't look like an utter shit show, I don't tend stop just to call it IN. I'm a woman and almost always traveling alone, so I have to consider not only my own safety, but how much assistance I can render on my own. I've never been on a flight where medical assistance was needed, but would volunteer if necessary. I wouldn't, however, volunteer someone else with medical training, especially if they were sleeping. Fourth comment, not sure about the obligation to stay, but certainly if a doctor has skills in the area of need, then there might be circumstances where they hang around still. Two examples with my partner doctor. He was on a plane with a young guy who started seizing. Medical emergency landing in Indonesia on his advice. Partner stayed with him until hospital because the ambulance was literally a couple blokes and a dodgy van LOL, and the guy was actively trying to die the entire time. He said it was complete chaos as they landed and disembarked. Anyways, the airline kept his luggage, didn't arrange any kind of follow-up or check-in with my partner. A few hours later, after my partner had gone to the hospital, he went back to the airport to try and get a flight and was held by immigration because he didn't have an entry stamp. The whole thing was an absolute disaster. Cost him a fortune and almost getting thrown in jail LOL. The kid ended up having a big tumor but survived. So, I can see why SIL was pissed. No good deed goes unpunished, and I've seen that countless times with my partner assisting outside of work. Oh, another example. Partner was driving to work and came across a guy who had just come off his motorbike on the highway. He was seriously fucked up. Called ambulance a TC who called in for helicopter retrieval. My partner stayed and worked on the guy alongside the paramedic. Retrieval doctor arrived. My partner ends up cracking his chest on the side of the road as a last-ditch effort cardiac tamponade. They all continued to work on him, but unfortunately the guy died on the scene. My partner at that time was finishing up his anesthetics training. He was pretty well placed to remain present. The retrieval doctor ended up being the boss of the program and offered my partner a job if he ever wanted to work in retrieval, said his interview was done LOL. Fifth comment, not solely because of that, no, but it certainly doesn't help when any time someone gets a boo-boo or has a cough or, has an emergency over international waters, someone always expects them to work, to shake off being drunk, which puts them in a legally liable situation, or remember procedures they no longer specialize in and might not be qualified to give advice on. You don't ask a plastic surgeon to help out with a heart attack. I mean, you could, but you shouldn't. They might be best in a pinch, but they are also not required to offer their services for free when they are not wearing their white coat that says they're on the job. Lawyers are more blunt. They will flat out tell you that they can't provide legal advice because you are not their client. But a doctor is supposed to just make everyone in need their client, and that's not how it works. I'm in Canada. If I get my EMT or MD out here and I'm visiting in the US and a medical emergency crops up, if anything goes sideways, I can be held legally liable, my insurance can get dinged, and I could potentially lose my license. I am not qualified to practice medicine in the US or elsewhere outside of Canada. Some people might be willing to risk it if they feel strongly enough that they can help, but requiring anyone with a PhD and MD to have to jump in is bordering very close to a form of indentured service, and that's outlawed in most places. My medical license doesn't obligate me to help everyone, and the expectation that it does, that you can't go home, get dressed up to go to a dinner party, then have 3 random guests there show you inappropriate things to any other guests, but it's okay, you're a doctor. No. You don't walk up to porn stars and show them your genitals. It's okay. They do this for a living, yeah, they get paid for it. They have regulated hours for it. They are not obligated to be voluntold by family members to do a party trick.